Hi guys, it's Sukacha. Welcome back to the Bookish Bulletin YouTube channel. This is the video that I've been waiting to make all year round and it's finally happening. I cannot wait to deep dive into the 5 books that I thought were my favorites of 2024. Just sit back, relax and watch the video till the end because we are going to be getting real. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about all the reasons why I liked a certain book and why it's on my favorites list. I have criteria this year. I have 3 criteria. So the first criteria is that the book has to have this quality where, I want many people to be able to read that book because it's just not something that should be passed off, right? So that's one. So if the book met that criteria, it's on this list. Second, I want the book to be the kind of book that, it's on this list because it stood out from so many other books because let's say it was just unputdownable. It had the quality of making me want to read more and not stop reading because I so wanted to know what was happening, right? And it's not just about plot. We're going to get into all of that. Now, the third criteria is this book taught me something new, something I didn't know about, right? So it opened my eyes and made me learn about something that I had no idea existed. So these are the criteria. So I love books like that. So that's why these are going to be the best loved books of 2024. This is the video we've been waiting for. Yes, let's get into it. If you've been following me, I love traveling. I love seeing the world. I love seeing different countries, meeting people from different cultures. I love cultural exchange. I love the fact that we are not limited to the cities we were born in and that we have the ability to go and expand our minds via travel. So I didn't travel this year as much as I would have liked for various reasons, but I was so glad when I found this book, Orbital, because I was able to make the trip of a lifetime when I read this book. I went into outer space. I am not even kidding you. I know a little more than the average person about what it's like to be in the International Space Station for 24 hours in orbit. And it's all because I read this book, right? So this makes up for my not having traveled in real life. This book helped me out, like when I really was feeling like a bit of an escape. I was able to do that via Orbital. Many of you will be divided about this book. From the reviews I've read, there are people who absolutely hate this book and there are people who absolutely love this book. There is a polarized opinion about this book. Why I think you should make an effort. First and foremost, it's important to read books that you normally wouldn't read and that aren't considered as part of your reading comfort zone. And Orbital might be one of those books for you, but it's worth giving a go. It is going to require you to focus as you read for lengths of time, and not all of us are going to be great at focusing. Let's just accept that. Some of us, it might come naturally too, and some it might not be something that they're used to doing. And the more you do something, the easier it gets. The more you focus while you're reading, the easier it becomes to pick up ideas and be more conscious of your reading and do real close and deep reading of text. So this book is like poetry. And even though it's a novel, it doesn't really have a plot. And a lot of readers are going to just shy away from reading it because it doesn't have a plot. But hold on and give it the benefit of doubt. Giving a benefit of doubt, not just in real life situations, but also when it comes to books is super important. And I would advise and request readers out there who are intimidated by this book to give it the benefit of doubt, right? Go slow with this. Have unparalleled lengths of time in front of you before you approach this book and really think about sentences. How do sentences make you feel as you read this book? Try to understand what the author's trying to say and really get absorbed. Go and read it in a really quiet environment for the best experience because the payoff, there is a payoff, guys. You will really feel what the author's trying to say. But you need to put in the work. It's not something that's going to come to you naturally if you aren't used to reading books like this. Orbital, I did the work. I had my tags, had my highlighter in hand, and I read it. And huge payoff. The next reason why I like this book is because I'm crazy about space. From when I was a child, I remember holding on those space encyclopedias and just going over all the images of the planets. The moment as a child, when I found out that there's something like space out there, it just blew my mind, right? Just to think about the concept of space for the very first time, that you have a solar system, that you are not alone in the universe, that there is a planet called Earth and there are other planets. I have always been fascinated by space. In fact, to be very candid here, the first kind of profession I wanted when I was a kid was to work at NASA. Really just work with space and the cosmos. Because I have this love for space. When I went into it, I went with a very positive mindset. I was like, this is going to be all about me understanding space a little more, even though I don't work at NASA. So this book really helped me understand what it's like to be in the ISS and to be an astronaut, and how it feels to like leave your country behind, not just your country and going to another country, but to leave the entire planet that you belong to and come and look at it from a bird's eye view for a length of time. So this book, you can finish it in 24 hours, and each orbit is a chapter in this book. The astronauts go around the Earth 16 times and you have to just give it time to really absorb it. It's beautiful, right? It makes you think about things that you couldn't think about. And that is the reason why I love literature. I love literature because it pushes the boundaries of your thought. You will come up with ideas and thoughts while you read texts that you never thought you were capable of having, right? And it's going to surprise you. Your mind is going to surprise you. You're going to expand your mind and your horizons as you read books that challenge you. Not just read for escapism, but like really dwell on the subject matter that a book is offering, right? And to really dwell on these pictures that the book is giving you, to really just picture that in your mind for a second, right? And not think about anything else, not really like be in the present in your house, right? So those are the reasons why Orbital is one of my favorite books of this year. And I think it is the most favorite book of 2024. So it is my top favorite. And I'm starting this video off with that because if you haven't read Orbital, you're missing out. And if you love travel, you probably should read Orbital. And if you love space, you should read Orbital as well. Yes, it's a book without plot. Yes, it's a book that has more characterization, but it's not about the characters as much as it is about the universe and the limitlessness and possibility and space and all of that. So I'm done ranting, but I can go on. So if you need a little help getting convinced to read this book, just hit me up. I'm on Instagram at Bookish Bulletin. Definitely up for conversing with you about Orbital and its merits. I find hardly any demerits in this, and I could be really biased, but let me know if you have a differing opinion. I know this book can be dense for a few readers, but give it the benefit of doubt. You will be surprised in the end. Next, I know this is going to be a fan favorite. A lot of you have already read Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and you all are probably in love with the book. And I can now proudly say that I am part of that gang who absolutely loves this book. And I thought it was marvelous, and I listened to this book on audio, and it was one of the best audiobook experiences I've had. The reason I really love this book is because I felt transported by it again, and this is again a great book if you love space and if you love movies like Interstellar and Martian, you will love this book. Another reason why Project Hail Mary is on my list is because it made me feel very involved in the narrative. It made me feel invested in the character, and it was essentially a story of survival, and I love stories like that. The movies I enjoy the most are movies like Independence Day, movies where, you know, people really, focus on survival, Castaway and things like that. So I love books also that do the same thing. That's why I really enjoyed this book. Yes, you do need to suspend your disbelief for a while when you read this, because it does meet extraterrestrial life forms in this book, and it might seem a little fantastical at times, but you just gotta trust in the power of the narrative and what the author's trying to do in terms of his world building and things like that. I have images of having read this book in my mind as if I made the voyage out of space. I feel like I was in the spaceship with the narrator, and like it was just beautiful. And it's not just about the description. This book I really enjoyed for the plot and for the characterization. I thought both characters were lovable, and for the plot, I thought it was really interesting because this guy was called up to serve and he chickened out big time. The main character chickens out of the mission when he's first called to enlist, right? And that's pretty normal. Every human being is probably going to react in that way. How he kind of gains control of a situation that he got into without even, agreeing to it is just marvelous, because that's what happens in this book. The narrator eventually accepts his situation and then decides to make the best of his time in space, even though he's technically on a suicide mission. So that's why I would recommend reading this book, because it will give you the courage that you need to take on the challenges that you have in life. As far-fetched as that sounds, it makes you think about possibilities and things like in the future, what could possibly happen with humanity going really into space exploration mode, and will we really make contact with, extraterrestrial life forms and things like that. So it's just a book that will make you think about things you normally wouldn't think about. And I love books like that as well. So that is why I would highly recommend reading Project Hail Mary, but listen to the audio for best experience. So it was just such a fun and lighthearted experience, because the narrator changes his voice and he does like multiple accents and he nails them. And he also does like the aliens voice and sounds, which are not in English, but you get the real experience of it when you listen to it on audio. The next book is Speak Okinawa by Elizabeth Mickey Brina. And the reason this book is on my top 5 list of 2024 is because it taught me about things that I didn't know existed. I had heard of the island Okinawa, where this book is set, which is in Japan, but I had no idea about the history of the island and the war that happened there and how it's a disputed region. So it was fascinating to kind of understand the historical standpoint of Okinawa. This book was amazing in that sense. And I listened to the audio book and the author herself narrated it. So there was this different experience of absorbing the information. And I find that when I'm listening to something, the retention is higher for me. And I don't know if you can relate, but that is the reason why I really enjoyed reading this book. And another reason I enjoyed reading it is because I'm always fascinated by people who kind of leave their home countries and go abroad. The concept of immigration and what happens to identity when people move countries, because it transforms, it's bound to transform. And when I was studying in my master's, I took up this subject called Fictions of Citizenship and the stories we tell about our identities. And identity is something that is so fluid and is constantly evolving. And this book, it was super intriguing because the mother is from Okinawa and Japan, and she marries an American man and then gives birth to a daughter who does not have any understanding of her cultural roots because she identifies as an American through and through. Then this book is also about language and how language is so important in shaping our identities. Also our relationships with our caregivers and our primary caregiver. This girl does not have a great relationship with her mom, the protagonist of this book, Speak Okinawa. And this is a memoir, so it's actually non-fiction. This is based on her real life experiences, right? And this book is about a struggle in terms of a relationship. I'm sure all of you can relate, and if you all are daughters out there, you have probably had multiple times when you have not been the most ideal daughter to your mother. You've probably given a really hard time. That's also the case with the narrator. She does give her mom a really hard time, but imagine what it feels like for the mother who is in a country where she's not able to get up to speed with English. She only speaks Japanese. Because of that, she's not able to even connect with her daughter because her daughter is through and through American and speaks English, and that's all she knows, right? So she's always felt more close to her father than she did her mother. It really is about forgiveness and it's about acceptance. It's also about the historical past of Okinawa. And it's about cultural identity. There is so much packed into this book basically, and it is such a beautiful exploration of a relationship and reclaiming control of that relationship, because ultimately the narrator manages to make it up to her mom and bridge the gap that they had in their relationship. And that's just beautiful, the way that comes full circle. So this book definitely deserves to be on my favorite list for 2024, and I highly recommend reading it. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that this year I went to Stephen King exploration mode and I read a few of his books. The first book I read of Stephen King's was Salem's Lot, and I was so happy that I read it because I really enjoyed myself. It was a real fun read through and through. It wasn't that scary, but it was scary, and like that is just the perfect combination for me, because I am somebody, I do get scared. I get scared when I watch horror films and stuff. But then this book was digestible. This book I could handle, and I really enjoyed reading it because there were certain things like the images, they stayed in my mind. I did sleep after reading it that night, but like it was just the right balance, you know, the right mix of things. I've not always been fascinated by vampires, but I still read this book because I wanted to see what the author would do differently. The only vampire books I've read are Twilight. I've read a bit of Dracula as well, like the retellings for teenagers and things like that. But I was curious about like what this book is all about. So I read it and it was unputdownable. This book, I just couldn't keep down. I was so absorbed in the narrative, and I just love it when a book does that to you. Like you just want to keep reading and you don't want to take breaks from reading. And I think that's a sign of a really good book. And that is Salem's Lot by Stephen King. I think he really goes all out in showing his prowess as a writer in this book. And I just enjoyed the plot so much. I just loved the pull of the narrative, right? Like the fact that it kept me like wanting to read it and find out what's going to happen in the end. And I was invested in the story. And these are the reasons why I really enjoyed this book. And I would read another book like Salem's Lot. So please let me know if there's one like that in the comments. I would be keen to know. My next favorite book of the year was definitely Maggie O'Farrell's The Marriage Plot. It was incidentally the first book that I read in 2024, but it stayed on with me till the end. The reason this book is on the list is because I am a huge historical fiction fan, and I'm always on the lookout for like books that have really stunned me, and this is one of those books. All right, so in Maggie O'Farrell's Marriage Portrait, we are seeing the author breathe new life into a character that existed in historical time, but it is a fictional retelling. All right, so the author kind of gives her narrative a new spin. Right, this character is not somebody we know a lot about because there aren't any records historically. There aren't too many of them, so we don't really know her life per se. But then when an author takes something like that and like gives us like the whole picture of what might have been, and like really just spins a new narrative. What we know of Lucrezia, who is the main character of the Marriage Portrait, is the fact that she was just a suppressed, oppressed woman. She was just a passive wife to her husband, and she ultimately died, and probably because her husband killed her in history, like Henry and all his wives and how they got killed. So along those lines, what's amazing about this is that Maggie O'Farrell, she does the research. She makes sure that historically this book is in line with the times, and she gives us a narrative where we see Lucrezia. We fall in love with her because she's so not willing to give up without a fight. She's willing to take her fate into her own hands and take charge of her life and make sure she is the one to triumph in the end. And I really appreciate that. She knows she's in a marriage where her husband has control, and she knows what she needs to do. And we see that, you know, so we get this really empowering tale of a woman. A lot of women have been erased in history, and there aren't enough narratives about women in history. It's really nice when an author takes something like this and really works her magic to give us through and through a narrative without any flaws, right? And I really liked that about the Marriage Portrait, which is why it's on my favorites list of 2024. Next, I got to talk about A Woman in the Polar Night. If you're a fan of travel, you'll probably devour this book. This is set in Svalbard, which is near the North Pole, and it is where there are endless nights and endless days. There are 6 months of daylight and 6 months of night follow after that. And the people who live there, they really need to think big picture and really focus on their survival. We get the narrative of a woman who accompanies her husband for 6 months and survives a polar night in Svalbard. She talks about the experience of living there, life there, back in the 1940s. So it's not only a historical kind of book, it's also a memoir. And you get this raw, unfiltered look of life in Svalbard back in the day. There were like seals out there, there were polar bears, and people had to live in constant watch of these animals that could threaten their livelihoods in Svalbard. And they had to like also build cabins that were pretty foolproof and safe. And questions came to mind while I was reading this, you know, how do the people take baths there? And I got really curious. How does the couple manage to stock up food for the winter and for the months where they really can't step out? How do they kill time, for instance, when they're like logged in, when they're snowed in for endless periods of time? How do they keep up their motivation levels? What's their approach to life? So these were the questions that were answered when I read this book. And, you know, just the beautiful descriptions, right? Like you see a horizon, it's just pitch black, and then you hear some sounds, and then there's a polar bear that's moving in front of you. I felt like I was there in that cabin. She talks about the space. She talks about the stove. They have like a wood stove, which is their main source of like fire and protection and warmth in such a cold place. And she also talks about how they keep themselves warm, and how she goes to the back of the cabin to wash up. And it's pretty scary because you're like in pitch black and you don't have like the devices that we have today, the torches and all the equipment that people take when they do make a voyage to a place like Svalbard back in the day. So it was just a mind-blowing book. Like I will always remember the experience of reading this book because I felt like I was again transported by this book, and it was just such a breath of fresh air. I hadn't read a book like this in a long time, and I think we paired it up next to Orbital because when Orbital gives you like the experience of going in orbit around the Earth, this book gives you the experience of like going in the North Pole and living there for 6 months as a woman with 2 other men. And how do we ensure that there's peace and things like that, you know? So it answers a lot of those questions. So I highly recommend reading A Woman in the Polar Night. Now it's time for the honorable mentions. The Book of Strange New Things by Michelle Faber is definitely on this list. And the reason for this is, think about a long distance relationship, right? Like you are miles away from each other and you are in love with the person that you are separated from. And how do you keep contact with somebody who is not once removed, but twice removed, maybe even thrice removed, right? So if you're interested in the logistics of long distance relationships, read this Book of Strange New Things. And if you are interested in the premise of the book, I'll tell you that. It's about a priest who is on a mission to convert aliens on another planet, in another dimension, into Christianity. And the funny thing is, the catch is that when he goes to that planet and he's all ready to do his mission, and he feels very important because he's a missionary, essentially bringing religion to another world, right? Those people are like super interested in like learning all they can about Christianity. So that catches our narrator off guard and the reader off guard as well. That's the catch, and that's what the narrator has to work with. That's what the book is all about. So it's just, one, how he deals with being so far away from his wife who's back home. And two, how he deals with being in a civilization where people are all too eager to learn about Christianity, right? What happens then? So these questions were amazing, and this book was transportative. I love books where I get that escapism kick, right? So that's what happened with the Book of Strange New Things, and that's why this is on my list as well. So I said earlier that a book that teaches me something I didn't know about will definitely be on this list. I am putting Soldier Sailor on this list as an honorable mention because this book gave me the closest look I could possibly get to the experience of being a mother, a new mother, and dealing with your newborn baby all by yourself without your husband's help or without anybody's help, really. What it's really like to be in the day-to-day of having just given birth to a child and then dealing with all the emotions that come with being a new mother and all the feelings, the conflicts, so many things. So the entire spectrum. I think this author encapsulated all of that and more in this book, Soldier Sailor, where it's basically about a mother and her child. Soldier stands for mother, sailor stands for child, and it's a baby. It is incapable of speech. So you need to be very tuned into your baby, and most mothers are, because they're biologically it happens quite naturally, but then it gets very challenging. There are dark times. It's not all like a rainbow, but at the same time, there was a fine balance in this book between like showing us the real claustrophobia of motherhood as well as showing us the payoff, the amazing aspects of being a mother and like how that really feels and the relationship that you have with your child and how it's beautiful. So you get both aspects, and I thought it was done wonderfully. It is an excruciating read in that sense. It's a bit like Orbital. You need to kind of focus and you might feel like you are really in that space for a while. But it is high payoff in that you learn something new, and it's actually the best book about motherhood that I've read. I've read Motherhood by Sheila Heti, I've read Rachel Cusk's Outline, and I've read a bunch of other narratives about motherhood, but I felt like this one really stood out, and it is shortlisted for next year's the Women's Prize. I'm really looking forward to seeing if it wins. But that is my second honorable mention. I read 42 books. I think by the time this video goes up, I would have read 42 books. And that's a lot. And I managed to surpass my reading goal. My reading goal for this year was 40, but I ended up reading 42 books, and I am now making this video. I have really thought about this list. I haven't just put it out there. I've really thought about whether this book should be on this list or not. Many of you might ask why Murakami's book is not on this list. If you're curious to know my thoughts about Murakami, then definitely check out this video up here for the full thoughts. Another reason it's not on this list is because it's really convoluted. I have really unpopular opinions about Murakami, so please check out the video. I'd love to know what you thought of this video. Do you have any questions? What were your favorite books of 2024? Let me know in the comments down below. Happy New Year in advance. Thank you for being amazing and supporting my channel in this journey, and I'm really enjoying making videos for y'all. I'll be back with more content very soon. In the meantime, stay safe, stay sane, happy reading. Bye.